The girl just pulled a small statue out from the ground and ended up releasing a calamity that could destroy the world. The girl's name is Suzume. She often has strange dreams and keeps encountering a figure that looks like her late mother. But today, a man appeared in her quiet little town. The man approached her and asked if there were any ruins nearby. After getting the answer he wanted, he left. But for some reason, Suzume felt a strange sense of familiarity about him. Driven by curiosity, she decided to head to the ruins in the mountains as well. This used to be a hot spring village, but now it has become a ruin. Suzume searched for a long time, but didn't see anyone around. Just as she was about to head back, she discovered a door. This door stood upright, right in the middle of a body of water. Out of curiosity, Suzume pushed the door open, but what she saw beyond it stunned her. She could see the world behind the door, but couldn't enter it. That's when Suzume noticed a strange statue beneath her feet. Oddly, the statue was covered in a layer of ice. Then something even weirder happened. The statue suddenly turned into a cat and ran off. Startled, Suzume turned and ran. She thought this strange event would just fade with time, but a few days later, while at school, Suzume noticed something strange happening beyond the mountains. Strangely, none of her classmates seemed to notice anything unusual. Then, everyone's phones started blaring with emergency alerts. An earthquake was coming. Although the shaking only lasted a few seconds, Suzume was shocked to see a massive, worm-like creature rising from the mountains, and no one but her could see it. Suzume already suspected that she might have caused this. When she returned to the mountain, she discovered that the giant monster was coming out of that very same door, and the man from before was desperately trying to close it. The man noticed Suzume's arrival, but in that brief moment of distraction, he was blasted away by the energy surging from the door. As the enormous creature crashed to the ground, the earthquake alerts sounded again. The man charged at it once more. Suzume rushed to help too. In the end, with the two of them working together, they finally managed to close the door. Afterward, Suzume brought the man back to her home and helped bandage his wounds. Through their conversation, Suzume learned that the man's name was Sota. The giant creature they had seen was called a worm. The worm is a massive force that runs beneath the Japanese islands. It has no consciousness of its own, but once it builds up enough energy, it erupts, causing a massive earthquake. What they did earlier only temporarily sealed it. If they don't use a keystone to properly seal it, the worm will appear again elsewhere. Sota's mission is to stop that from happening. Suzume suddenly realized that the keystone he mentioned might very well be that statue she had pulled out. Just then, a cat appeared at the window. It looked scrawny and frail. Suzume went to get some dried fish to feed it. She found the cat adorable and asked if it wanted to be her kitty, but what she didn't expect was that the cat could talk, and it clearly didn't like Sota, so much so that it transformed Sota into a chair and then ran off. Sota immediately chased after it. Although Suzume was stunned, she picked up Sota's keys and ran out as well. They ended up on a ferry boat, where people were all talking about the moving chair they'd just seen. By the time they got to the deck, the little cat had already jumped onto a nearby speedboat and was gone. Suzume went outside to the deck and found Sota. She finally confessed to him that she had pulled out the keystone, but Sota didn't blame her. He only blamed himself for arriving too late. Sota told her he was a closer. He's been traveling all over Japan to stop the worm from escaping. That night, while sleeping, Suzume had that strange dream again. In the dream, she was a small child, and she opened a strange door in hopes of finding her mother. Then Suzume woke up. The boat had already reached shore. Meanwhile, the cat they were looking for had gone viral online. People started calling it Daijin. Although Sota told Suzume to go home, she was still worried, because it wasn't just Daijin that had gone viral, but also the chair-shaped Sota. If he got caught, he would definitely be taken away for research. So they began tracking Daijin's whereabouts using clues from the internet. At that moment, Suzume's classmate Amabe happened to pass by. As the two chatted over some oranges, Suzume suddenly spotted the worm emerging from the mountains in the distance. Without time to explain, Suzume quickly grabbed Sota and rushed off. Although Amabe didn't know why Suzume was so panicked, she decided to give her a ride on her motorbike. After reaching the destination, Sota told Suzume to stay back. While he went to close the door himself, the worm had appeared at the site of their former school, which now lay in ruins. Sota wanted to shut the door, but in his current state, he couldn't even hold the key. That's when Suzume grabbed the key and ran forward. With the worm about to break through, Sota told Suzume to close her eyes and feel the emotions once tied to this place. In that moment, Suzume began to hear voices of the students who once went to school here. Sota stood beside her and began chanting an incantation. Together, they managed to close the door. But just then, Daijin reappeared. He warned that more doors would continue to open, then vanished without a trace. Suzume sent a message to her Aunt Tamaki to let her know she was safe and asked her not to worry. Afterward, she stayed at the guest house run by Mabe's family. During dinner, Suzume's phone buzzed. It was a long text message from her aunt. Though lengthy, every word reflected Tamaki's deep care and concern. Suzume mentioned that Tamaki was already in her 40s, but still looked beautiful. As her guardian, Tamaki had raised her ever since she was little. Suzume felt she had stolen the best years of her aunt's youth, keeping her from ever marrying. Later that night, while getting ready for bed, Mabe couldn't hold back her curiosity. She asked why Suzume always carried around that chair. Suzume replied that it was a keepsake left behind by her mother. Mabe also wanted to ask why she had gone to that abandoned school. Though Suzume didn't answer, Mabe had the feeling she was involved in something important. The next morning, someone online spotted Daijin on a large bridge. Suzume rushed back to her room and found Sota. Sota realized that Daijin had already reached Kobe. The two of them set off immediately, but not long after, a heavy downpour began to fall. They took shelter at a bus stop. Just then, a car pulled up beside them. Inside was a young mother with 2 kids. They were also headed to Kobe and kindly offered Suzume a ride. The woman's name was Rumi. She ran a restaurant in Kobe. She told Suzume that if she had nowhere to go, she could stay at her place for the time being. As soon as Suzume arrived in Kobe, she spotted Daijin. Just then, a massive worm burst out near the amusement park. Suzume and Sota decided to split up. Suzume would close the door, and Sota would go after Daijin. But in the process of chasing Daijin, Sota accidentally activated the power. The long-abandoned amusement park suddenly lit up again. Even the Ferris wheel began turning. Suzume climbed onto it, and this time, she actually saw the world beyond the door. What lay inside was identical to the world from her dreams. Mesmerized, Suzume started walking toward the door. Sota saw this and rushed to stop her. If she kept going, she would fall from the Ferris wheel. Then Suzume was suddenly brought back by countless voices. Though the place was now deserted, it still held many people's cherished memories. Sota led Suzume out of the door. Together, they closed it shut. Everything returned to silence. Suzume described what she had seen behind the door. Sota was shocked. She had seen the world of the ever after. It's where souls go after death, a world opposite to our own, and the place where the worm dwells. When Suzume returned, she found that the people at Rumi's house were still awake. They had been worried about her. They had even made her delicious fried noodles. After dinner, Suzume and Sota sat down to talk. Sota was actually a college student. His biggest dream was to become a teacher. Being a closer was a role passed down through his family. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Sota felt his body turning cold and stiff. It was as if he were sitting alone in front of a door, his soul slowly drifting away from his body. Just as Sota was slipping into unconsciousness, Suzume suddenly kissed him, bringing him back to life. Suzume showed Sota her phone. Daijin was now in Tokyo. Rumi drove them to the train station. She knew Suzume had run away from home and reminded her to contact her family so they wouldn't worry. Suzume checked her phone and found over 50 unread messages. Her aunt was already on her way to find her, but Suzume couldn't worry about that now. She and Sota had to get to Tokyo as fast as possible. Sota's home was in Tokyo. They soon arrived at his place and pulled an old book down from the shelf. Inside, it clearly documented everything about the worm. Keystones were used to suppress the worm. There were 2 in total, aside from the one Suzume had pulled out. The other keystone was in Tokyo, sealing the worm's head. Daijin had likely come to Tokyo to pull out that second keystone. Just then, Sota's friend Tomoya showed up. He had come looking for Sota because he hadn't seen him in a while. Suzume pretended to be one of Sota's relatives. After chatting with Suzume for a bit, Tomoya left, but the moment he stepped out, an earthquake alert went off. The worm had emerged again, and it was very close. Suzume rushed over in a panic. At the same time, Daijin appeared. Sota immediately gave chase. They finally saw the source of the worm. It was coming from a tunnel, and almost the worm's entire body had already emerged. There was no time to hesitate. Sota jumped onto it without a second thought. Suzume followed right after. To others, the worm was invisible. They only saw a girl floating up into the sky. The enormous worm coiled in the air. But the people below remained completely unaware. It spiraled higher and higher, now covering all of Tokyo. If it were to fall, it would cause an unimaginable catastrophe. The only way to seal it was with a keystone, but they had no idea where the keystone was. That's when Daijin spoke. It had already passed the keystone's power to Sota. That meant Sota was now the keystone. Sota had already sensed something was wrong. Ever since he had turned into a chair, he had felt the presence of the keystone's power. He just hadn't dared to face it. Now, with the worm about to crash down, the final choice fell to Suzume. Would she save countless lives, or sacrifice the person she had grown to care for? It was a painful decision, with no right answer, but in the end, Suzume chose to save the world. A beautiful aurora flashed across the sky like a rainbow, then vanished. No one knew what had just happened. No one knew the price Sota had paid. Under Daijin's protection, Suzume landed safely on the ground. In that hazy moment, Suzume thought of her mother. The chair was one her mother had made for her with her own hands. It was Suzume's most precious treasure. Then, Suzume woke up. She found herself beneath a river channel. Ahead of her was a large door. It was the Tokyo Gate. Through the door, Suzume clearly saw Sota in the ever after, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't enter. Just then, Daijin came running up. Now, at last, it could be alone with Suzume. But all Suzume could think about was how to bring Sota back. She yelled at Daijin to go away, to stop talking to her. When Daijin heard that Suzume didn't like it anymore, it suddenly turned weak and fragile. After closing the Tokyo Gate, Suzume walked away. She went to a convenience store to charge her phone. Then she boarded a train to the hospital, because she remembered Sota had mentioned that his grandfather was hospitalized. Suzume found Sota's grandfather Munakata. He seemed to already know everything. When he learned that Sota had become the keystone, he remained calm. He had also seen the worm appear earlier. Suzume asked him how to enter the ever after. She wanted to rescue Sota, but Munakata said she was meddling in something beyond her. Sota was gradually becoming the vessel for a god. The keystone, those living in the real world, could no longer intervene. Munakata didn't want Suzume to live with guilt. He told her to forget all this and return to her normal life. But Suzume couldn't forget. She decided to find a way to open the Tokyo Gate herself. Seeing her resolve, Munakata sat upright and said, "The world of the ever after might be beautiful, but it is the land of the dead." He asked Suzume if she was afraid. Suzume firmly answered that she feared nothing. The only thing that scared her was a world without Sota in it. Her words deeply moved Munakata. He asked Suzume what she had seen in the ever after. Suzume told him she had seen her younger self there, and her deceased mother. Hearing that, Munakata realized that Suzume had accidentally entered the ever after as a child. He then told her to go find that door. Only through that door could she enter the ever after. After Suzume left, a large cat appeared at the window. It seemed like Munakata already knew it, and he entrusted it with helping Suzume. Later, Suzume went to Sota's home. She washed off the dirt from her body. Then, she put on Sota's shoes. But just as Suzume stepped out, she ran into Tomoya. He told her to get in the car so they could go find Sota. At that moment, Tamaki also arrived, demanding that Suzume return home with her immediately. Without time to explain, Suzume jumped into Tomoya's car. Seeing this, Tamaki got into the car as well. But then, Daijin suddenly appeared in the back seat. It didn't say a word. For the first time, Suzume, who had been under so much pressure, could finally rest. This time, they were headed to Suzume's old hometown. Later, they stopped at a service area for food. Suzume had no appetite and sat alone in the car. Then, another earthquake hit. Worried, Tamaki rushed over to her. She asked why Suzume wanted to go back to her old home, but Suzume didn't know how to answer. Her silence only made Tamaki more upset. She tried to drag Suzume away with her, but Suzume had reasons she simply couldn't go back yet. They began to argue. That's when Suzume noticed something was off about her aunt. In her memory, Tamaki had never once yelled at her, let alone said something like telling her to leave. Suddenly, a large black cat appeared behind Tamaki. Its name was Sadaijin. The moment Daijin saw it, he rushed forward. but he was no match for Sadaijin. Tamaki then returned to normal. The next morning, the three of them continued on their journey. Tomoya figured those two cats must have something they wanted Suzume to help with. Sadaijin explained, they hoped to use human power to return to their original forms. This sudden voice shocked Tomoya, and he accidentally drove the car into a ditch. They were still 20 kilometers from their destination. Suzume prepared to run the rest of the way. Tamaki noticed an abandoned bicycle in the field nearby, and decided to use it to help Suzume get there. Finally, they arrived at Suzume's hometown. The once warm, cozy house had become a pile of ruins. Suzume followed her memories and dug a small box out of the ground. It was her treasure chest. Inside was her childhood diary, though she couldn't remember much from her early years. She must have stumbled through a door back then. As she flipped through the diary, a flood of memories returned to her. Her hometown had been destroyed in the 2011 earthquake and tsunami. Her mother had died in the disaster. Since then, her aunt had been the one raising her. Daijin called Suzume over. The door she had been searching for was hidden beneath a mass of vines. It turned out Daijin hadn't been the one opening the doors to release the worm. On the contrary, it had been guiding them to each door. Without hesitation, Suzume jumped in. The worm was still trying to break through the sealed door. Then, Sadaijin transformed into a massive white cat and pinned the worm to the ground. In the distance, they saw Sota. Suzume sprinted toward him. The apocalyptic scene all around filled her with fear, but she never stopped running. Suzume was determined to save Sota, even if it meant becoming the Keystone herself. Hearing her resolve, Daijin understood her heart. It came to help too. With their combined efforts, Sota was finally saved. Then, Suzume noticed Daijin, wounded and exhausted. It transformed once more into the Keystone because Sota had been rescued. Sadaijin could no longer hold the worm down. Sota brought Suzume to a high point and began reciting an incantation. Hearing the chant, Sadaijin charged toward them. Then, it itself transformed into a keystone. Sota and Suzume, each holding a keystone, leapt down and drove them into the worm's body. Everything went quiet. They had saved the world. At that moment, they spotted a little girl standing on a distant ridge. Suzume suddenly understood. That little girl was her younger self. She was looking for her mother. As little Suzume cried, the older Suzume brought her the chair. She knew this young version of herself was in pain, but she would grow up one day. She told her, the future isn't something to fear. In the future, you'll fall in love. You'll be loved by many, even if things seem dark now. One day, the light will come. Hearing those words, the little girl stopped crying. Under Suzume's gentle gaze, she stepped through the door to the other world. After everything was over, Sota decided to return to Tokyo for a while. Suzume walked him to the train. They embraced. Sota thanked Suzume for saving him and promised he would come find her again. The next day, Suzume and Tamaki took the ferry home. At the dock, the man who had always liked Tamaki came to pick them up. From then on, Suzume returned to her normal life. She started studying even harder than before. 4 months passed, and once again, Suzume saw that one person she had missed so deeply.